I'm here with Caroline Wallace, who is the Strategy Director at the Legal Services Board, the LSB. Caroline, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to talk to us around some consumer-facing issues and thinking about legal professionals of the future and the role that regulation has to play. Can I start by asking you how you think consumer behaviours and expectations are changing the way in which legal services will be delivered in the future?
I think we can expect to see levels of unmet demand for legal services to persist, and I don't really foresee any changes in that situation. But I think what is likely to change is that we are getting increasingly different groups of consumers becoming apparent. I think there are going to be the empowered consumers who are technologically aware and who have expectations around how they access all the services in their life, not just legal services. And they're looking for online services, and they're looking for reviews of services through social media, so an element of reputational regulation coming in. And they want and expect to shop around as well. So they're not going to be happy not to see prices and indicators of quality and reviews of the services that they want to choose between. On the other hand, we are going to see, and we are seeing, increasing inequalities in access to justice. And there are groups of consumers who are being left out of all of those developments. Sometimes it's because of the digital exclusion, and we have groups of consumers who can't access the internet. But also there are groups of consumers for whom legal services really are problematic because of their vulnerabilities. And we see this clustering of problems, not just legal services problems, but health problems, housing problems. I think they call it intersectionality, where the same groups of consumers are unable to access justice, and are the same ones who are having trouble accessing healthcare, and they're having trouble accessing other public services as well as trouble with utilities and other regulated sectors of the economy. So that there is that kind of differentiation, different groups of consumers becoming increasingly apparent. I think we also need to think about small business consumers and not leave them out of the equation either. And our research at the Legal Services Board shows that one of the things that small businesses are really, really interested in is one-stop shop. So they do, from time to time, need legal services, but they also need accountancy services and other kinds of services. And what they really like to save them time when they're setting up small business and running small businesses is to get that all, if they can, under one roof.
Okay, and so you're talking about the complexity that's developing there and the levels of savviness, if I can call it that, of the consumer, whether that's an individual or a small business. Thinking about the legal professionals of the future, what kind of professionals are needed to deal with those consumer needs and that diversification?
I think the legal sector is always going to need qualified, professional and ethical individuals, and nothing is going to change there. But what is going to change in light of these changing consumer demands is that legal professionals are going to need to think more about business skills, how they run a business, how they meet that different types of consumer demand, and how they do that in a way that is inclusive and that addresses the needs that are out there. And one of the ways that they may be able to do that is through technological and technical changes, and thinking about how they can use technology to make the delivery of legal services more efficient, more effective, or to reach out to groups who previously were having trouble accessing legal services. And I know you're going to talk a little bit about technological change and the issues that might bring. I do think that there are expectations around inclusiveness and diversity, so I think we're going to probably see more diverse providers in the future. And whatever technological changes come along, I think there will always be a need for people skills, and perhaps there might even be a bigger emphasis on people skills because it's that element of a legal service that a machine can't deliver.
Extending then technology, would you say technology is a driver or an enabler of future legal services delivery?
I think it can be both, depending on the circumstances. I think there are some providers in the legal sector who are very, very forward-looking, who scan the horizon eagerly for the next technical development and think about how it can be applied to the particular issues and matters that are relevant to legal services. And to that extent, I think it can be a real driver of different kinds of legal services. But there are other legal providers who are a bit more reactive and who will look around and see what other legal services providers are doing, and who will realise that in order to compete, in order to retain a position in the market, they need to adapt similar kinds of innovations into their business. So to that extent, it's less of a driver and more of an enabler of competition and enabler of market share, I suppose.
Okay, and thinking about risks that may arise for the consumer, if you had to sort of have your top 3 risks that you think might be present for consumers in that future changing landscape, what might they be?
One of the key risks is clearly unmet demand for legal services. People who could benefit from or who really need sound, decent legal advice, or the more transactional legal services as well. And the risk there is that demand for legal services is increasingly not going to be met in future unless the sector as a whole can adapt. Some of the developments that are going on are going to exacerbate that situation. Things like pressure on public spending, the digital divide, and advice deserts, and those kind of things that are emerging are just making that risk much more prominent, I think.
And how do you see regulation needing to evolve to continue to maintain public trust and confidence in light of those risks?
I think it's very clear that regulators do need to be forward-looking. They should be scanning the horizon. Because of these changes that are taking place, there is perhaps less continuity with the past. We can't just expect it to be business as usual. These changes in the environment, we need to be quite agile and respond to them. Regulators themselves are going to need to go further to develop their own knowledge of technology and business, because not only are legal services providers going to have to move with the times, but regulators are as well. I think there's a really good debate to be had about the extent to which regulators should be ahead of the curve or responding to the changes in the environment and in the sector. And that's an interesting point to explore. I think we need to be a little bit ready for the future, but we as regulators can never second guess what the market delivers. That's not a great position to be in. We need to respond to how the market innovates and changes. We will always, as we have in the past though, need to balance consumer protection with accessibility. It's a real balancing act, and we have to find the sweet spot in the middle, where in this particular market, with these complicated services provided by specialists and experts, the consumers can be confident that they're properly protected, but at the same time the burdens on the providers are not so great that the services become unaffordable and otherwise inaccessible. One final thing for regulators to think about is what can we do to simplify and clarify the regulatory landscape so that there is better knowledge amongst the general public about what we do, what protections are available to them when they use legal services, and how they can best engage. And one key challenge for us as regulators is, can we get the government interested in that simplification and clarification agenda at all? To make things better for everybody.
Yes, which kind of touches on the work that Professor Stephen Mason is doing with UCL.
Absolutely, I think he's carrying the flame for that. Obviously, the government at the moment is very distracted with other things. But in the meantime, there is space for thinking about what the future of legal services regulation might look like and what kind of legislative change we might need to support that.
Yes.
And it's really important to do that thinking, to consult widely, and to think about how that whole framework might need to change to keep up with technological change, and also to progress on the journey to, I guess, a simpler and clearer framework for regulation.
Okay, Caroline, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.